There used to be laws, justice, not anymore.
By a wide margin, South Park The Fractured But Whole is the funniest role-playing game since South Park The Stick of Truth came out 3 years ago. This one's gags are more focused on parodying the superhero movie franchise craze than RPG mechanics, which makes it feel a little bit less novel, but this time its tactical combat is also deep enough to stand on its own.
I have to go back, change the present if I can, and find his cat. And in doing so, perhaps I can change what has happened to all of us.
Like The Stick of Truth, The Fractured But Whole looks and sounds so much like the show that at a glance it could be easily mistaken for a 20-hour episode when you're not in combat. Exploring its similar but expanded map of South Park and its dense references to the show is a treat for fans. It's hard to tell what's supposed to be real and what's all in the kids' collective imagination, and The Fractured But Whole delights in blurring that line. You'll have kids shooting kite lasers and using super speed one moment, then pausing the fight to let a car go by the next.
Car!
Then adults get involved and you have to start wondering what's really happening. It starts out somewhat slowly, with your custom-made new kid and the boys embarking on a quaint quest to find a missing cat for a $100 reward, which Cartman plans to use to jumpstart the coon-centric equivalent of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But after a few hours, it spirals into signature South Park absurdity, and you're fighting everything from Professor Chaos's minions to crab people. There's some genuinely hilarious stuff, like Timmy's Professor X parody and Wendy Testaberger's superhero identity, to name a few.
They don't have a connection at Netflix.
It even makes killing Kenny funny again. There were just a handful of times where a throwaway racial stereotype joke didn't feel clever enough to justify the sensitive subject matter.
You dare disrupt the flow of chaos?
The pace of the gags only really slows down when you're wandering the streets and going through the quick but frequent loading screens. The frame rate takes a hit sometimes too. My big gripe though is that while a lack of navigation indicators makes the screen look clean, I had to constantly pop open the map to figure out where I was supposed to go and which of the nearly identical houses contained my objective. And a lot of the text on the screen is a little too small to read comfortably from the couch. In the menus, The Fractured But Whole takes an interesting approach to character development. You start with one superhero archetype, but later can freely mix and match with powers from others, while slotting in gathered artifact items to increase your power level and stats. That makes the new kid a Swiss Army knife who can adapt as needed to support the other 3 characters on your team. He gradually felt less like my character as Cartman grudgingly opened up more powers, but being able to freely customize his look with gathered costume pieces helped. You can even change your gender at will.
Okay, great. So as you know, that means that you're cisgendered.
The grid-based combat scenarios start out pretty easy, even on Mastermind difficulty, but they get much more interesting in the second half thanks to many more things to deal with, including telegraphed attacks, area denial, summoned-in enemies, and real-time timers that force you to move quickly or be hit. Because positioning matters and everybody's ability set works differently for range, direction, knockback, and other special effects, there's a fair amount of depth to it. And by the end, you have more than a dozen distinct characters to choose from. What gets repetitive are the active elements of combat. There are only 3 timing minigames for all of the abilities. Either tap the button once, tap it really fast, or tap a sequence. Then you tap to block or to recover some health after taking a hit. The same goes for the ultimate ability animations, which are awesome and hilarious the first few times, but long and unskippable later on. That's some incentive to change out your 4-person team and your character's powers every so often. Between fights, you're free to explore the quiet mountain town, and it's full of mostly simple puzzles that are a matter of pushing a button once you have the right tools. Using the new kid's fart-based abilities to solve puzzles and enhance other members of the team wears thin pretty quickly because of the repetition. But there are sections in the main story mission where you're using a variety of them in a custom-built puzzle sequence where it takes some thought and feels more rewarding.
They say that some farts are so powerful they can actually bend the fabric of time.
South Park The Fractured But Whole is another epic-length episode of the humor that's kept fans of the show laughing for 20 years. The Marvel vs. DC parody delivers regular laugh-out-loud moments with only a few faltering gags, and the combat soon evolves into something much more complex and interesting than the Stick of Truth's simple system. Navigation and repetition of some of its simple puzzle mechanics drag a little, but otherwise it's an excellent South Park game that's also a strong RPG.
All right, Mysterion's dead, you guys.
For more on great RPGs, check out our reviews of Divinity Original Sin 2, Battle Chasers Night War, and XCOM 2 War of the Chosen.
Journey on, brave warrior. We will meet again.